his delight, rejoicing always before him, rejoicing in the world, his earth, and having my delight in the sons of men. What a fascinating passage. There's all kinds of things. If you were to cross-reference some of this with some of the Psalms and with Genesis 1, there's all kinds of things we could talk about from this passage. But I really want to just focus on the reality that wisdom is trying to say, I am antique, I am ancient. I'm not a fad that's just here today and gone tomorrow. And the more we identify ourselves with wisdom, the more we grasp onto wisdom's hem, the more we will be rooted in the eternity of this world. In a world that seems to come and go very quickly. Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's back up to verse 22. He mentions, the Lord possessed me at the beginning of his way. Again, this word is, we mentioned this in your first bullet point under number 4, is the word derek. It is way, course of action. There's several other places that this word is used in the book of Proverbs. I've only listed a few. It's used dozens of times. But the idea is that if wisdom is there as part of God's way, you will be part of God's way when you utilize and embrace wisdom. Wisdom, interestingly enough, is portrayed in verses 23 through 26 as preceding the created order. All these words, when there was no depths, I was brought forth. Before the mountains were settled. Okay. Again, wisdom is not something separate from God. It cannot be because it is eternal. It even says in verse 23, from everlasting. Okay, so it is a quality that is intrinsic to who God is. Just kind of being personified as a woman here by Solomon, but we're to understand that this is not a separate being, a separate person. This is part of who God is himself. If it is everlasting, then wisdom is part of who God is, and we have the ability to tap into that everlasting resource. When you utilize wisdom, you are tapping into something that predates the world. And we always talk about how I want to have an eternal impact. I want to have a lasting legacy. Well, when we utilize wisdom, we're tapping into something that is older even than the created order itself. And I suspect will endure beyond the created order itself. And that's exciting to know that we could tap into that and be part of that. Wisdom is a tool of creation. Wisdom is portrayed in verse 27 as an instrument of God. When he established the heavens, I was there. When he inscribed the circle on the face of the deep, when he did all these things, I was there. So he is an instrument. Wisdom is an instrument of God. And if God utilizes wisdom to do what he does, we are identifying with God as children of his when we use that tool as well. That's the point that they're trying to make. We are using an ancient tool, not just the latest Christian craze. Verse 28 is interesting. He uses the words above. When he made firm, now he's talking about creation, or she is talking about creation. When he made the firm skies above, that's the word above, min ma'al. And then he used the word deep, when the springs of the deep became fixed, tehom. So basically saying, look high, look low, look around everywhere. Everything you see was created by God utilizing wisdom. And therefore, wisdom is going to know how things work. And we will do well to utilize wisdom in our own lives. We will be consistent with the created order. Even a fallen created order, by the way, still works by certain principles that were hardwired into it. There is logic. There is 2 plus 2 always equals 4. That's not a relativistic, subjective truth. Well, how do you feel about that? It doesn't matter. It always equals 4. Because order and wisdom is hardwired into the created order, even a fallen created order. If not, buildings couldn't be built. Cars couldn't be built. Nothing that we could do would make any sense. It does make sense because God utilized wisdom in creating the created order. And look at the delight that she exhibits in verses 30 and 31. I was beside him as a master workman. I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. So wisdom, God was delighted to use wisdom wisdom was delighted to be used by God. Isn't that fascinating? Rejoicing in the world, verse 31, his earth, having my delight in the sons of men. Wisdom will similarly be delighted to be utilized by you as well. Remember what we talked about before? There's not an ulterior motive. You don't have to vote for wisdom so that wisdom can get elected. Wisdom simply wants to be used by you. God will be delighted, God will be glorified when we respond wisely, when we act wisely, when we say wise things. Wisdom is intimately involved with the creation of the world, and therefore she has a very good understanding of how the world works. Again, chapter 10 through 31 is a list of things that Solomon has observed. And under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, whether he understood that process or not, he saw something and he says, listen, this is generally the way things work. And you're going to be ahead if you know that. You're going to have better relationships with those around you. You're going to have a better business interaction if you understand the wisdom that is hardwired into anyone's observation of creation. Her assistance in creation makes her that much more worthy of our attention. And it's too bad how old things are undervalued. Unless you run an antique store, nobody really is interested in older things, it seems like. It's got to be new. You know, people say, have you read a good book lately? And I said, yeah, I read the Bible. They say, no, a real book, another book, a real... You don't get much gooder than this, frankly. And yet, age is looked down upon. George Burns said this, talking about the weakness of age. He said, tennis is a game for young people. Until age 25, you can play singles. From there until age 35, you should play doubles. He says, I won't tell you my age, but last time I played, there were 28 people on the court. Just on my side of the net. So age is viewed as a weakness. Do you know that when TV producers and marketers, when they choose shows and when they produce shows and when they put in advertisements for shows, they're not focused on what are older people thinking about this? What are the mature people, the people who have experience? What do they think? You know who they're gunning for? They're gunning for 18 to 24-year-olds or 18 to sometimes 34-year-olds. They're gunning for that narrow, younger demographic. Now, I'm not saying that those people are idiots or anything like that. I'm just saying that these are the people from their perspective. We're going to spend the most money. We're going to buy. Their opinion is the one that matters the most. That's unbalanced at best. And it could be unfortunate societally. I think those people have a lot of wonderful ideas, but I think there's also a lot of value to tapping into older resources, especially one ancient like wisdom. So the antiquity of wisdom makes her worthy of our attention. And as we think through some of the societal fads, through some of the Christian fads, we have to remind ourselves, those things come, those things go. They fly through the night sky like a meteor and then dissipate and can't be seen anymore. Wisdom is always there, always accessible, always interested in being available to us. So verses 22 through 31 assert that wisdom is ancient and not faddish, but the chapter closes in verses 32 through 36 by affirming that wisdom is an action and not just an awareness. Wisdom is an action and not just an awareness. Let me read for us verses 32 through 36. Now therefore, O sons, listen to me. For blessed are they who keep my ways. Heed instruction and be wise. Do not neglect it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at my doorposts. For he who finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who sins against me injures himself. All those who hate me love death. This is kind of the final appeal of this chapter, to remind us of the importance of wisdom and to remind us that wisdom is an action, not just an awareness. We've heard about the accessibility, the qualities, the utility, and the antiquity of wisdom. We've heard all these things. But we are summoned not just to know about them, but to accept wisdom and live out according to wisdom, live our lives according to wisdom. So I want you to notice some of the awareness kind of phrases in this passage. In fact, yes I do. That's your first bullet point under number 5. Wisdom is an action, not an awareness. Not just an awareness, but do notice the awareness or recognition phrases. There is the word listen or heed in verses 32, 33, and 34. This is the Hebrew word shema. There is I believe it is in Deuteronomy 6. Jay, is Deuteronomy 6? It's a section, because the way they would name things back at that time is by using the first word of what comes after it, and that would be the name of that section. And that section in Deuteronomy 6 is called the Shema, because the first word is hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is unique, and you shall have no other gods before him. So it's called the Shema. When he's saying listen, there's an awareness capacity, there's an awareness element of that, but there's also a you need to listen and do these things element. You need to listen and hear and live in a certain way in light of that. So the word Shema, but look at how it's repeated in verse 32, 33. Heed the instructions. Verse 34, blessed is the man who listens to me. You need to hear and heed. You need to listen. There's also the words in verse 34 of watching and waiting. Watching daily at my gates, waiting at my doorposts. And I just noticed something, so I'm just going to throw this in as I'm kind of seeing new things even as we're sitting here talking. Do you remember where wisdom was? Wisdom was at the height, at the top of the heights. Wisdom was also at the gates, at the doors, at the entranceways, making herself accessible. Where does wisdom call us to be? Wisdom wants us in verse 34 to be at her gates, at her doorposts. Just like she made herself accessible to us, we need to be accessible and available to be wise. That's good preaching there. I hadn't even noticed that before now. But it's an interesting way of bringing the whole thing full circle and bringing us back to this need. She's accessible to us. You need to be there. You need to be standing there when a moment of decision comes and say, what is the wise thing to do right now? Okay. What's the word I'm going to say that's going to stir up anger versus the word I could say that will turn away wrath? And sometimes you've got to make that, you've got to stand at that decision point. You've got to stand at that gate dozens and dozens of times every day. And once you make that decision, and it's the right decision, and you turn around, and there's another opportunity to make a wise decision. There's no cruise control in the Christian life. Now I'm lost. So we talked about the awareness and recognition words, but note, I want you to see the action words. She's calling us to action. In fact, I have these, I think I have some of these, yeah, we have some of these listed out. Notice that she refers to her listeners as sons. Here again, she's drawing us back to what she mentioned at the very beginning. In verse 4, she said, listen, O men, listen, O sons of men. O people who are identified with just the natural foolishness that you would continue to be enveloped in if you did not choose to leave that and embrace wisdom. Now she says, if you are intentionally making decisions to follow wisdom, to be discerning, now you are her son. This phrase is used, throughout. We could be sons of God.